Alright, hey guys, Pax here. Welcome back to another Pokemon Pocket video. In this video, we'll be going over top performing decks from tournaments this past week, the first week of the Paldean Wonders meta. If you guys are new to my channel, really do consider if you like and subscribe. Really does help me out, especially as a small-time content creator. Without further ado, let's get right in to the weekly meta report. So if this is your first weekly meta report on my channel, I'll be looking at a couple tournaments, looking at a couple top performing decks from each, giving my opinion on the decks as well as comparing it to the previous meta. And compared to the Fantastical Parade meta, the meta has changed a lot in my opinion. Paldean Wonders was more revolutionary to the overall meta compared to Fantastical Parade. At the end of the video, I'll be using one of the decks in PvP to see how it performs. The website that I'll be using will be in the description below if you guys want to check it out. But yeah, first tournament is the Paldean Premier. 548 players, a lot of players. And then looking at the metagame, looking at the most top performing decks and also the most popular, Suicune Ex, Baxcalibur. Where's Suicune Greninja is right here. Wow, okay. Rest in peace, Suicune. This deck has been super meta relevant for several months at this point, ever since Suicune Ex came out, and they're finally getting replaced. It's been long awaited, but rest in peace Greninja. I mean, Greninja can still be used in a lot of decks, still very prominent overall, but still somewhat refreshing to see. So yeah, Suicune Baxcalibur, 52% win rate, 100 players, so that's pretty noteworthy. And then looking at Suicune Greninja, 26% win rate with 17 players. This should be higher given there's less players, but yeah, it seems like most people using Suicune Greninja didn't make it too far in this tournament, so that is something. But yeah, again, I'll talk more about Suicune Baxcalibur as well as comparing it to Suicune Greninja later on. Looking at this Mega Altaria Greninja. So Greninja, yeah, broke up with Suicune, is sticking with Mega Altaria, seeing some pretty decent win rate, yeah, 72 players. Bellibolt Zeraora, once again, I'll talk about this later on. 49 players use it, 56% win rate. Hydreigon Mega Absol, 18 players, and has a 47% win rate. So definitely a lot higher compared to Suicune Greninja, which does make sense because I feel like currently Hydreigon Mega Absol is the go-to Darkness deck. Still very good. And then looking at the standings, Suicune Ex Baxcalibur. And yeah, here we go. Might as well talk about it. I did make a deck showcase. It should be the one before this. Very fun deck. The playstyle is very different compared to Suicune Greninja. So one thing that's noteworthy is like comparing both decks. This deck only runs one Cyrus, whereas of course, might as well, let's see. Suicune Greninja made it to, yeah, the mighty have definitely fallen, but I was gonna pull this up later for reference. But looking at this deck, very straightforward. Ideally, you do want to lead with either Suicune Ex or even Shenpao or Frigibax evolve into Baxcalibur as soon as possible. And Baxcalibur is an amazing non-EX given the ability, so Ice Maker. Once during your turn, you may take a water energy from your energy zone and attach it to the water Pokemon in the active spot. And in damage, 90, pretty decent, requires 3 energy. Going second, if you do evolve this guy your second turn, you can start attacking. So just very fast paced, straight up 90 damage, and it's a non-EX, so not much risk to that. But looking at this, yeah, ideally you do want to go second, but you can be very fast paced if you get a very good starting hand your first turn. If you go first, leading with Suicune Ex, Frigibax in the bench, your second turn, evolve into Baxcalibur, Suicune Ex can start attacking. So yeah, getting a huge lead against your opponent. And then looking at Shenpao, only one copy. This card is very interesting. So one notable thing is that it only has 130 HP, so very frail. 2 attacks, first one's Icicle, only requires 1 water energy, does 20 damage. Second attack, Diving Icicles, requires 3 energy. After attacking, discard all water energy from this Pokemon. This attack does 130 damage to one of your opponent's Pokemon. So can be very disruptive. You can target, let's say like a Mega EX, Mega Absol EX, attack, next turn Cyrus, and then just beat up your opponent. Of course, the main downside is that after attacking, you do discard all water energy, but at full power, if you have your whole board built, 2 Baxcaliburs, this guy can attack every turn. So looking at Baxcalibur, ability Ice Maker, you get 1 free energy. And if you have another one, another free energy. And on top of that, each turn you get 1 free energy. Yeah, so given this, you get 3 energy in 1 turn, which means that this guy can start attacking. So you would attack, discard all energy next turn, feed this guy back, and just attack yet again. So doing 260 damage in 2 turns. So yeah, this deck is extremely strong towards the middle to late game. Once you're just fully built, your opponent really can't do much. And the main issue with this deck, I feel like especially with Shenpao, is the card Protective Poncho. As long as the Pokemon this card is attached to is on your bench, prevent all damage done to that Pokemon by your opponent's attacks and abilities. On one of their bench Pokemon, let's say like your opponent has it on Mega Absolute EX in the bench, Chien-Pao can't do damage. Chien-Pao can attack, but it's just like Oricorio. Like you would attack, but like no damage will be done. So to counter this deck is running Guzma. Very straightforward. This deck came out in Celestial Gardens over nearly a year ago at this point. So yeah, pretty old. But looking at this, very straightforward. Just discard all Pokétools. So you can just do that and then just bully your opponent. We also have Irida, Giant Cape, starting planes just to give your Pokemon a little bit more HP. Looking at Suicune, 140 HP. Yeah, somewhat frail, especially in this meta. Can easily get one-shotted by Pokemon such as Bellibolt EX, which we'll talk about later on. Even with Giant Cape, which is rather unfortunate. But again, this deck is running, of course, as I mentioned, starting planes. So you're getting plus 40 HP, meaning that Suicune Ex can survive one attack from Bellibolt EX. Professor's Research, Pokeball, Rare Candies, mandatory in most decks, such as this. This deck also runs Mars, could be very disruptive, especially towards the middle to late game, especially after your opponent does knock out Suicune. You would use Mars, lowering their hand to just one card, and depending on the remaining cards, that could be very detrimental to the game. And then looking at the matches, won a lot of times and lost twice. Lost against Mega Altaria EX and Chingling. Does make sense since Chingling does disrupt getting Baxcalibur out, making it so that you can't use Rare Candy. Lost against Mega Altaria Greninja, and Greninja plus Mega Altaria at max damage can do 150 damage. Absolutely one-shotting Chien-Pao, so that's something to note. And of course, this deck isn't running Protective Poncho, so yeah, a huge liability, especially if your opponent is using Greninja. So comparing Suicune Greninja to Chien-Pao Suicune, yeah, this deck made by Light XZ, again, got to, where's it at? 89th place. Yeah, so very low, the tournament leaderboard, but looking at the decks, it is interesting. I feel like this deck probably shouldn't run Chien-Pao because I feel like Chien-Pao, what makes this guy amazing is the Baxcalibur support. Without this, it's very hard to build Chien-Pao. Personally, I would just run Greninja EX. Instead of Chien-Pao EX, Greninja EX synergizes a lot better with non-EX Greninja and Suicune EX. Only running one Cyrus as well. Okay. Yeah. Because the Greninja Cyrus combo, I feel like, is what makes this deck the best. And only running one copy of Cyrus and it's not helping you. This deck is running a Giant Cape and starting planes, but keep in mind Chien-Pao does 130. It can one-shot without Giant Cape and starting planes. It can one-shot Greninja, can do a ton of damage on to Suicune EX. And overall in this meta, it could be somewhat slow, especially if you can get Baxcalibur out. But if you do, it can be very fast-paced compared to this deck. Again, as I mentioned earlier, if you go first, your second turn, you could potentially start attacking with Suicune EX. Chien-Pao is fairly easy to build up with Baxcalibur support. So looking at this, yeah, this deck is still rather fast-paced, but can easily get outsped by this deck. I feel like that's the main reason why this deck is far better. Also, prominence of Protective Poncho making it so that non-EX Greninja won't get much value. It ultimately comes down to RNG. I mean, you could be using this deck and just get like the worst RNG. If you watch my deck showcase, my previous one with Chien-Pao, there was a match where I just got very bad RNG. My last 2 cards, or like my last like 4 cards, were Baxcalibur related. And it was pretty rough. Like I just couldn't get this guy out. Ultimately lost to like Mega Ampharos EX. Not that popular, but again, that kind of shows that like you could be using the most broken deck, but you can still lose because of RNG. Chien-Pao Baxcalibur should win against this deck, especially since it only runs one copy of Cyrus. Part of me does still lean to Suicune Greninja because again, the poke prominence is very insane. You can just poke the Chien-Pao, knock that guy out. Next turn, target Suicune EX or even Baxcalibur in the bench. Retreating out of Baxcalibur is rather hard given that this Pokemon has a retreat value of 3. So if you can Suicune Greninja Baxcalibur into your opponent's active, sure, they can Ice Maker and then potentially get 3 energy and then retreat, but you're still getting a lot of value since your opponent is using a ton of water energy, and depending on that stage of the game, they might not have enough water energy to attack with either Suicune EX or Chien-Pao EX. So yeah, personally, again, we're very early in the meta, so I'm very cautious of like what I say, but I think Suicune Greninja, if you want to use this in ranked, you can still see some success. I mean, there's a lot of, for one thing, ranked, there's a lot of very good like non-meta decks that see success in that game mode. And Suicune Greninja, they might not be S tier now, but they're still like A tier, B tier. Like you can still see some success, climb to Master Ball using this deck. Although I would recommend, of course, removing Chien-Pao with probably like still waiting for Mega Greninja EX. You know they're saving that guy for a special time, and that guy might change the game. So far, Greninja cards have been very goated, so yeah, really can't wait. But currently, yeah, I would replace Chien-Pao with Greninja EX, 2 copies of Cyrus, remove Inflatable Boat and replace it with another trainer card, or even Indeede Ex. Indeede Ex could still see some viability. So this guy could still also get one-shotted by Chien-Pao, so it could be a liability. Might be better just running Lucky Ice Pop. But yeah, that was the number 1 deck. The next deck that we'll be going over is number 2, made by Jacob J. Magnezone Heliolisk. We've seen this deck in the past, but in this tournament got, I feel like most in part because of Suicune Baxcalibur. Yeah, this is a type advantage, potentially disrupting them. But looking at this deck, let's see. I feel like the most common pairing with Magnezone currently is either Magnezone Greninja or Magnezone Oricorio. Oricorio is a good pairing since, of course, it does disrupt a lot of EXs, not able to attack that Pokemon. That deck is more defensive, whereas this deck prioritizes more on damage. So looking at this, Magnezone, Magneton. So we got 2 Magnetons. This guy is Stuff of Legends, came out ever since the game was released, and has been the go-to Magneton card for a long time. This deck is running 1 copy of the Crimson Blaze version of Magneton. So it doesn't get as much value as this one, but you do have Spark, so you do 20 damage. This attack does 20 damage to one of your opponent's bench Pokemon. So could be very disruptive, especially if you do decide to Cyrus later on. That could definitely win you the game. This Magneton Cyrus like 4 turns later. But looking at this, ideally you do want to lead with Helioptile. Go second, lead with Helioptile. Your second turn, evolve into Heliolisk and do 120 to 160 damage. So looking at Heliolisk right here, stage 1, of course, 100 HP. Thunderbolt requires 2 energy, does 120. After attacking, discard all energy from this Pokemon. So right off the bat, after attacking, you do 120 base damage with type advantage, doing 140. However, this deck is running Clement's Backpack. During this turn, attacks used by your Magneton or Heliolisk do plus 20 damage to your opponent's active Pokemon. So I think that's why this deck is running 1 copy of the Crimson Blaze Magneton, because that Magneton paired with Clement's Backpack, you're doing 40 damage to one of your opponent's active and one of your opponent's bench. So getting some pretty decent damage overall. So getting some decent chip damage. So yeah, this card paired with Clement's Backpack does 140 with type advantage, 160. This deck is also running 1 copy of Elemental Switch. So if you have Magneton in your bench, Heliolisk in your active, you attack with Heliolisk, discard all energy. Your next turn, you could use Volt Charge, feed Heliolisk 1 energy, Elemental Switch, and just like that, Heliolisk can attack yet again. So yeah, this deck is rather fast-paced. So you would lead with Heliolisk. Once that guy gets knocked out, sub into Magnezone. Once Magnezone gets knocked out, sub into Heliolisk, and just sweep your opponent. That's when Cyrus could come in clutch. You would Cyrus one of your opponent's bench Pokemon, attack with Heliolisk, doing 120 damage, and then securing the win. And then looking at the matches, won a ton of times, lost against Suicune Baxcalibur. Interesting. I feel like on paper, this deck kind of counters this deck because, for one thing, it's only running non-EXs, so your opponent's really not getting as much value as they can compared to a deck that runs EXs. But I feel like going against Baxcalibur, actually lost twice. Interesting. I feel like this deck just got a very good lead compared to this, outspeeding Magnezone Heliolisk and just winning the game just like that. But nevertheless, won a ton against Bellibolt Ex, Magnezone. Again, we'll talk about Bellibolt Ex later on. And yeah, that was the Paldean Premier Tournament. Keep in mind, we'll be talking about one more tournament after this one. Overall, I really do like how the meta has shifted, because looking at the previous month, if you guys want to check it out, tournaments last month didn't really change. I feel like Hydreigon, Mega Absol, Suicune Greninja still dominated. The majority of the cards from Fantastical Parade weren't really that meta changing. But yeah, as I say, it's looking at what the Sigma got 3rd place using Mega Gardevoir Meloetta. So pretty cool to see, but overall, yeah, the cards weren't as meta changing, but looking at this month, starting it off strong, starting it off unique and strong, and I very much do like it. The last tournament that we will be going over is the Storm's Weekly Standard number 21. Happened on March 3rd, so rather recent from the time I'm recording this video. And then looking at the metagame, very similar. Yeah, so Suicune Ex Baxcalibur, 42%. Rather low. Interesting. So we shall see how it performed in the top 10, but yeah, Mega Greninja, yeah, very solid investment, 47%. Magnezone Bellibolt, 22 players, 57%. And looking at Suicune Greninja, only 4 players used it, and a 44% win rate. And then looking at the standings, what is going on? Mega Lopunny EX Annihilape got 1st place, made by Zeraora. Second place, Tomer, Suicune Baxcalibur, Magnezone Bellibolt. Interesting. Okay. So we might as well talk about the first place deck. This kind of caught me off guard. I do kind of like seeing Mankey in a recent tournament because if you guys have been playing this game ever since it came out, Mankey Primeape used to be extremely fun back in the day. I might as well pull it up. I'm kind of digressing, but this is worth it. So looking at Primeape from Genetic Apex. So looking at this Mankey does 30 damage. You do take 10 damage of recoil, so somewhat decent chip damage. But looking at Primeape from Genetic Apex, fight back, 40 base damage. If this Pokemon has damage on it, this attack does 60 more damage. So 100. Back in the day, running this guy was extremely fun, especially paired with Marowak EX. Huge props to you guys watching if you do remember Primeape Mankey back in the day. But looking at this deck, running Primeape from Mythical Islands, so only doing 50 damage, but it is guaranteed 50. Only one copy because the main draw is to get into Annihilape. 140 HP, Dynamite Punch does 90 damage. This Pokemon takes 30 damage to itself. So very fast, aggressive chip damage. One notable thing here is that this attack only requires 1 energy. And one thing about fighting type overall is that it's very hard to get energy because looking at like fire, water, and lightning, you have baby Pokemon supporting getting you a ton of energy, whereas fighting has nothing. So this is why releasing cards such as this freaking Abomination right here makes no sense. 4 energy. After attacking, you can't attack. So you have to do Lyra to kind of work around that. So looking at this, I very much do like seeing it. So ideally for this deck, you do want to lead with Annihilape. Attack once this Annihilape does get knocked out, summon another one, keep attacking, and then towards the late game, sub into Mega Lopunny and sweep. So looking at Mega Lopunny, this card came out in Crimson Blaze. Rapid Smashers, very similar to Marowak EX, so an updated version of that. Again, if you guys remember that deck, so yeah, Rapid Smashers requires 2 energy, flip 2 coins. This attack does 90 damage for each head. Your opponent's active Pokemon is now confused. So max damage, you could be doing 180, and minimum damage, you could be doing 0. Either you're doing 0, 90, or 180. But regardless, after attacking, you do confuse your opponent, so towards the late game, could be very disruptive. And to help with RNG, this deck is running 2 copies of Will, guaranteeing this Pokemon to do at least 90 damage. I was going to use the Magnezone Heliolisk deck for the battle at the end of this video, but I'm kind of leaning to this deck because I really do like Mega Lopunny overall, just like the playstyle. Very high risk, high reward, so in ranked could be infuriating, but in casual battle, not too much, like in the Emblem event. But yeah, very fast-paced deck. Run 2 copies of Copycat, so you could just be outdrawing your opponent, depending on what they're using. Looking at matches, won a ton of times, did go in a slight loss streak. Lost against Magnezone Bellibolt, Suicune Greninja, Suicune Baxcalibur. So yeah, that was the Mega Lopunny EX / Annihilape deck. The last deck that we'll be going over, or a couple decks, because I'm going to be looking at a couple of variants of this specific Pokemon, is the Bellibolt EX deck made by TGX Xerox. We're going to be looking at this one. We're also going to be looking at Bellibolt EX Zeraora made by Hossi. First of all, we will look at the Magnezone variant. This deck could be very fast-paced given the right amount of RNG. If all the stars align, you could just do 140 your second turn. So this is Bellibolt EX, HP 160 stage 1. High voltage cannon does 70 base damage. If you have 4 or more lightning energy in play, this attack does 70 more damage. This is in play. So you can feed this guy 2 energy, making it so that it can attack, and then have like, let's say like 2 energy on like Magneton. You can do 140. So yeah, given that very fast pace, I feel like for this deck, you do want to lead with Bellibolt EX. I feel like for this deck, you do want to lead with Magnemite. There's really 2 ways. Either lead with Tadbulb, eventually into Bellibolt EX, or Magnemite and eventually evolve into Magnezone in a couple of turns, doing 90 damage and also kind of disrupting with attack ability. Also, Oricorio here, amazing, especially if your opponent's using an EX. It'd be very disruptive any time of the game, beginning, middle, or late. And depending on the scenario, you might not even run Bellibolt EX, especially if your opponent is using EX Pokemon. But it very much depends on the game. It's really hard to explain, but you just have to know. Like towards the middle to late game, if Bellibolt EX isn't out yet, and your opponent's using like an EX, and you have 2 copies of Magnezone and Oricorio on the field, I feel like it's not really worth running Bellibolt. I mean, sure, you could do that, but your opponent very much could Sabrina later on and win the game. Again, it's very hard to explain, but you have to like be in that battle. You have to be in that specific scenario. You have to kind of know your opponent's deck. If they have Sabrina, Repel, whatever, that could disrupt you. Leading with Bellibolt, there's one very specific scenario that comes to mind if you go second. So if you go second, your first turn, you have Tadbulb in your active 2 Magnemites in your bench. You feed Tadbulb, next turn, evolve into Bellibolt EX. Feed the Pokemon, making it so that it can attack. In your bench, evolve both Magnemites into Magneton. And just like that, you have 4 energy. Yeah, so it's very, very specific, but you could get an insane lead. I'm just explaining the potential. Yeah, it could be very nasty to pull off in ranked. At that point, like, your opponent might as well surrender. This deck is running 1 copy of Clemont, just to make sure that you can get Magnetons out as fast as possible. Lucky Ice Pop, Lucia, Sabrina, all to help you out. Giant Cape as well. Professor, of course, Copycats, yeah. This deck won 8 times, lost 3 times, and tied once. So, yeah, looking at this, makes sense. Won against Suicune Baxcalibur, Mega Altaria Greninja. Ultimately, of course, lost to Mega Lopunny EX. However, keep in mind, this deck also won. Damn, again, ultimately comes down to RNG. No matter what deck you're using, if you just get very bad RNG, then your opponent can just easily sweep you. Keep in mind, since Mega Lopunny EX and Annihilape are both fighting type, they are doing type advantage. Yeah, looking at a slightly different variation, the one I personally like more is the variant with Zeraora, made by, of course, once again, Hosi, or Hasi, however you say the name. This deck requires a bit of RNG, but is the most fun. I feel like when it comes to getting energy, it's far easier in this deck. So going second, so comparing scenarios, once again, as I mentioned before with the Magneton combo, this deck, if you do leave a Tadbulb and have 2 Zeraoras in the bench your first turn, next turn if you evolve into Bellibolt EX and attack, you're doing 140. Because Zeraora, you guys probably know, came out quite a while ago. Ability, Thunderclap Flash. At the end of your first turn, take a Lightning Energy from Energy Zone, attach it to this Pokemon. So in other words, if you have 2 out, you get 2 energy on the board, and pairing that with the free energy, you're getting 4 your second turn. This deck's also running 1 copy of Oricorio just to add a bit of disruption. Also acting as an Oricorio counter as well. Yeah, this deck's also running Electrical Generator. This card requires a bit of RNG, but you can get a lot of value. So flip a coin, if heads, take a Lightning Energy from your Energy Zone and attach it to one of your bench Pokemon. So you could use this to, like, let's say, like, feed Bellibolt, but overall, even if you feed like Zeraora or Oricorio, you're getting some good value because, of course, yeah, you're getting more energy on your board, making it so that Bellibolt can attack, making it so that Bellibolt EX can attack with max damage far sooner. Sabrina, you could use this card towards the early to mid game just to kind of like disrupt your opponent, as well as towards your late game. Could potentially be your win condition. Guzma, Cyrus, Professor's Research, 2 red cards and 2 copycats. So a lot of hand disruption with this guy. And this disruption overall, because Guzma, Sabrina, red card, which does make sense because I feel like this deck is very fast paced. Much like most lightning type decks, you do want to just outspeed your opponent, and cards such as red card Sabrina does help with that. Looking at the matches, won 9 times and lost twice against a mirror match and Mega Lopunny EX Annihilape. And yeah, that was a weekly meta report. Overall, a lot of very good and promising contenders. I really can't wait to see how it shifts. It does feel very refreshing because Suicune Greninja, Mega Absol, Hydreigon, both of those decks did carry me to Master Ball, but they have been getting rather stale. Part of the reason why I like this game is that you could very much invest in a deck for several months. But at the same time, I do want the meta to change. You know, like, make the cards very meta relevant, very like viable for several months, but slowly get phased out and introduce new cards. And yeah, it's very interesting to see because looking at this, where is Hydreigon Mega Absol? 28th place. Yeah, from the looks of it, got to 28th place in a recent tournament. So this is something noteworthy. They're still good decks, but power creep is slowly hitting, as you can see. And yeah, to end the video off, I'll be using this deck in PvP, and we'll see how it performs. All right, here we are in PvP battle. We are going first up against, ooh, yes, this is gonna be rather juicy. So next turn, we can just one-shot Oricorio. With Primate, because of type advantage, we can one-shot this Nightmare Bird. GG. Okay. All right, one more battle. This is too fast. Yeah, this don't have to do anything. Make this very fast. GG. Okay. All right, last battle going second. Okay, hand looks pretty good. Next turn, we can get Annihilape out. All right, opponent plays it down 2 Liwix, Meow, Pokeball. This should be a guaranteed, of course, Baniri. Perfect, we did get Lopunny. At this point, just to maximize my HP, I'm gonna end my turn. I don't really have to attack, so just do this. All right, opponent Mars's Copycat, Rare Candy, bam. That was a huge blunder. And Meowth, okay, Meowth is here, nice. We do get Mega Lopunny. I am actually tempted to Copycat at this point. There we go, Copycat. Hopefully, given my YouTube luck, I can get something good. Rare Candy and Professor. Okay, so a slight upgrade, nice. I'll definitely take that. Let's do this. Reckless Charge. I could one-shot this Meowth if I get a Heads. Or if my opponent gets a Tails. They do the coin flip. Okay. Easy first point, just like that. Taking 10 damage of recall, but overall, pretty good value. I really hope my opponent doesn't concede. Please. They're building up for this guy. This might be still a very fast battle, but nevertheless, I am planning on making a Mega Lopunny / Annihilape deck showcase because this is so much fun. So, why not? Does it give my opponent a little bit of a chance? I'm going to retreat out as Mankey. I could just one-shot this Litwick, but might as well just do this and then evolve manually this guy and attack. I might as well, sure, why not? Get a second copy of Mega Lopunny out. Could do 0 damage, but I have hope. Just like that, one shot, 180. Yeah, that's Mega Lopunny. Very fun. Could be rather inconsistent, but that confusion is still pretty nice, especially towards the late game. Could definitely help you out tremendously. My opponent has one more chance to turn things around. Or not. Okay. They still have a chance. They still have a chance because I could will, but you know what? Here we go. Might be getting rather cocky, but this is... I'm doing this in the Emblem event, so don't really care too much. 90. GG. Yeah, I'm definitely making a deck showcase because I really do. I like Mankey overall, just Mankey, Primeape, and Annihilape as Pokemon. Really do like them. But yeah, that was a weekly meta report. Hopefully you guys did enjoy. Hopefully you guys found this informative as well as a little entertaining. I tried to be. Next video, as I mentioned, Mega Lopunny EX / Annihilape deck showcase. The following video after that, depending on how things go, I might follow the same theme. Being very ambiguous with that, but yeah, you guys will see. Which is why, of course, I really do consider if you like and subscribe. But yeah, that's the video. Hope you guys did enjoy. And I'll see you guys on my next one. Peace.